Hi, this is Rachelle with Journal Life's Journey, and I'm going to make a folio, and I'm starting out with this mailer that I received some stickers in. So I kind of just pulled it apart, pulled the flaps off, and now I'm trimming it down with my heavy duty paper trimmer. It's a bit of a struggle, but I get the cuts made. So I just cut all the edges off, and I'll end up with two separate pieces. The pieces measure about 5.5 by 7 once I trim everything down. Here I'm using Fabri-Tac, and I'm going to be using the papers from, well, some of the papers from the two latest kits that I've listed over on Etsy. You can check those out. I'm using the Garden Floral for the cover, and I'm using the green page. So again, I just put on some Fabri-Tac and I'm smoothing down the design on the mailer using one of those Dollar Tree Cricut knockoff scrapers, and then I'm going to take the paper trimmer and trim off the excess. So I have about an inch border around the mailer cardboard chipboard piece. It's not cardboard, it's chipboard. So, and it's a lightweight chipboard. Here I am using this tool to miter the corners of the cardstock cover, just so I don't have to guess and worry about if I'm cutting off too much or not enough. Then I'm going to go around and add the double-sided tape. I've done this process many times on this channel, so if you want more detailed process information on how to make the cover, that's what this is, by the way. I'm working on a cover. I guess I should have said that in the beginning, but if you want more information on that, I will link to another video in the iCard up above with more information. So yeah, I'm just going around all four sides with the double-sided tape, burnishing it down, and then I'm going to go ahead and take the scissors and cut off those mitered corners. And again, this is easy. That's why I like to use a tool, because it gives you the exact space you need to be away from that corner. There's no guesswork. You don't have to worry about it. So here I'm taking off the tape backing and adding some Fabri-Tac and folding over those sides. And it's just wrapping the chipboard piece from the mailer and covering it up, turning it into a cover. I don't know what made me use the Fabri-Tac to adhere the cardstock to the chipboard. I probably should have used a PVA glue and spread that out, because later on I noticed a little bubbling. I think I was able to repair that, but yeah, I think PVA glue for spreading glue on the main part of the cover would have been a better option. So that is the first piece covered, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same process for the second piece. So during this process, I did make quite a few mistakes. You will see all of those. I left those in just so that you can learn from the mistakes that I make, and hopefully I'll remember and learn from them myself. Again, I'm following the same process I did with the other piece. I think one of my favorite things to do in paper crafting is making covers. I may just dedicate some time to making a bunch of covers and making those available. If you would be interested in something like that, let me know, because I do find that making the covers is like one of my favorite things to do. Both covers are wrapped, and now it is time to put these together. I gave this quite a bit of thought, and then I decided to use fabric. So I printed the green page from the Garden Florals on fabric, and here I'm going to go ahead and tear off the piece that I want to use for the spine. Now this is one of the mistakes that I made. I had this all planned out so that the design would kind of flow from the back cover to the front cover through the spine. But when I actually put it together, I didn't put it together right. But it was okay. I wasn't going to let that stop me. At one point in my craft life, I would have let that stop me and I would just gave up. But I kept going. But here I'm just trimming off the border and preparing this piece of fabric to become the spine. Then I decide to go ahead and seal these covers. I'm using matte medium to do that. I printed the graphic on cardstock with an inkjet printer, so I was thinking that if any water came into contact with it, it could ruin the design. So I'm using the matte medium to seal it. I didn't use Mod Podge because I didn't want that type of sealant on this cover. I wanted it to remain as matte as possible, and even though Mod Podge has a matte version, it still has a little sheen to it. So here I'm taking a piece of craft text, a scrap piece that I had, measuring it up and trimming it down to the size that I need for the spine. And I wanted this to be a folio, not a book. I didn't want to have to end up putting a bunch of pages in. So this is another mistake that I made. I made the spine very small. So most of this piece that you see here is going to wrap around those covers, and I think the spine ended up being a 1/2 inch, if that. So I'm just scoring here to make sure that I have equal amount of the craft text on each side of the spine, and I even gave myself a little gap to accommodate the width of the chipboard with the cardstock wrap, but in the end it still wasn't enough. But here I'm going ahead and adding some double-sided tape, and then I thought, well, maybe this white craft text might show through the fabric since I have thin fabric and because of the way I was going to wrap it. So I am taking a green Tombow marker and going around the edges just to make sure that none of that white would show. And this craft text is like a cross between fabric and paper. It doesn't tear. You can wash it, and it's really sturdy. It's kind of like using Tyvek for your spine. It's something that is not going to tear easily. It may tear eventually, but not easily. So I added the fabric tack to the craft text, and then I'm placing the craft text on the fabric and creating the spine. Here I'm going over the other side of the craft text with the green marker, again, just to make sure none of that white shows once I attach it. And here I'm just drawing the lines on the spine just to make sure that I line my covers up correctly, and then I filled in the middle because I didn't want that white showing. And I'm adding double-sided tape as part of the adhesive I'm going to use to adhere this to the cover. Then I'm going to also add some fabric tack to it. So here I'm just using some clamps that I got from the Dollar Tree to hold the cover in place while the adhesive dries. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So this is the cover. It didn't flow all the way across the way I wanted, but in the end, that isn't even going to matter. So, and then I have some coffee stained envelopes that I have from my stash, and I'm going to use those as some flips or flaps on the inside cover of the folio. So I'm just going ahead and adding some glue, spreading that out on the flap of the envelope, and I'm going to adhere that to the cover of the folio. And I'm going to do that in the front and the back. So I have two envelopes that I'm going to do this with. And I didn't show every step of me adding the flaps, trimming papers, and all of that because it's tedious and long. And I didn't think you would want to see me trimming paper over and over and over again. So I didn't show all of that. But in a future video, I will come and show some of the steps that I did. This was kind of just on the fly, spur of the moment type of thing. And I just had an idea and just jumped in the craft lab and started working on it. So here again, I'm just spreading out the glue, adding the envelope to the inside cover. And before I go any further, I decided I should reinforce the folds of the envelopes. Envelopes aren't the strongest. These aren't like craft envelopes or anything like that. So I used some washi tape that I felt kind of coordinated with the papers that I'm going to use to reinforce that fold on both of the envelopes. And I added glue just to make sure that it stays in place. So here I'm taking some book page that I experimented with coffee staining. I kind of balled it up and just dropped coffee on it just to see what kind of effect I would get. And I'm considering using that to cover the inside of those envelopes. I'm not going to stick it down yet, but here I also have some papers from the She Blooms kit that I'm going to use as a flap or cover for each side of the folio. And I'm using the decorative edge from one of the envelopes from the She Blooms kit to create that same style edge on this flap. And I'm going to put a flap like this on the front and back. So I'm mixing kits. I'm using the She Blooms kit and the Garden Floral pages. Those were like a specialty page to go with the floral eggs. And here I just traced the first decorative edge flap, and here I'm cutting the second one out. And I'm using gathered twigs for the first time to ink the edges. It's a little darker than I thought it would be, but I kind of just wanted to use something different. Vintage photo and walnut stain are okay, but I just wanted to try something different. And maybe a green color probably would have been better for this, but I really wanted to try the gathered twigs. And I did notice while doing this, and I keep telling myself this, but it keeps happening. Don't do another green journal. I think this is the third or fourth green journal that I have done. It's like, it's not my favorite color, but it's like I just keep gravitating to doing green journals. And I don't know why that is. I try so hard not to do a green journal, and what do? Here I am doing another green journal. So I'm going to try and break it for the next thing that I work on. I mean, I've done other things in between that were not green, but I keep coming back to green. So this is what it's looking like. And I'm just flipping back and forth to see what I have here to work with. And I'm looking at that spine, and I haven't even filled everything in. I haven't filled it out. I haven't added any pockets or ephemera or anything. And I'm almost completely out of space with that little teeny spine. And because of the craft text, it's kind of a thicker material. It does not forgive. So it's not allowing any extra space in there. But I am going ahead and adding some more flaps and folds to each side. And I'm just taking some of the paper from the She Blooms kit and folding it in different ways and adding it to the panels of the folio. And I will come back and add more pockets, flips, folds, envelopes, other things. That's why I was looking at the spine and thinking, this is not going to be enough room, so I'm going to have to change something here. But anyway, I'm going ahead and tearing some of the papers from She Blooms to cover the inside of the envelopes too, or the pocket part of the envelope, not the inside of the envelope. Then I decided to cut those little flaps on each side of the envelope, and I was going to cut them completely off, and then I decided to go ahead and glue those down to make sure that my envelope stays kind of sturdy. So here again, I'm looking at how this is folding, and it's not looking promising. So, and I don't want to have to like hold something down out of the way just to be able to fold it. So I decided, after much thought, to go ahead and cut this in half and do something else with my spine. So I took my X-Acto knife and my metal ruler, and I started slicing through the middle of the cover. And I now have these two pieces with two fabric covered pieces of craft text on them. So I decided to get my crocodile, punch some holes, and add some eyelets. So I punched 3 holes and put in 3 eyelets on each side of the cover on the spine area. I punched the holes, then I set the eyelets, and then I am going to lace these 2 covers together. I refuse to give up on this project. So even though it wasn't working, I didn't allow enough space for the spine. I think I'm going to be able to save it by using the eyelets. And this gives me a chance to try something I've been thinking about trying, using pockets, flips, and folds. Instead of doing it that way, I'm actually going to be doing it on the cover or for a spine. So all the eyelets are set, and I just so happen to have some green seam binding that I dyed myself using Tattered Angel sprays, using ink pads, distress ink, probably some distress oxide, maybe even some acrylic paint, all kinds of things to make this green seam binding. And I created it for another green journal that I was working on, but I didn't use it. So the color schemes to me are perfect for this cover. So what I'm doing is lacing the seam binding through the eyelets, kind of like shoelaces, only, well, yeah, just like shoelaces. But instead of, you would think the bow would be at the bottom, I decided to put the bow at the top so that it can hang down and kind of give a tassel feel without being a tassel. Then I can also come back and add some charms and other things to it. So this folio can be loosened up and taken apart and other things added to it now that it has an adjustable spine. And I think it looks pretty cute. It's not what I initially intended, but I think it's turning out great. So I will be back to add the rest of the flips, folds, ephemera, pockets, all that good stuff. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on notifications, and I'll holler at y'all next time. Bye.